Guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Corey, and I wanted to start this channel so I could talk about my love for sports, specifically my love for my two favorite football teams, the Florida State Seminoles and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, this video is going to be about the Noles because they just started the season 0-3. We recently just lost to Memphis. Before that, we lost to Boston College and then Georgia Tech in the season opener. And yeah, there's just a lot to go through with the Noles. I'm not going to do a game recap because at this point, all three of the games look very similar. Florida State kind of has a little bit of a game plan. They get a little bit of rhythm here and there, but it's just not enough to overcome any of their opponents so far. And their opponents are good, but they're not these amazing teams. They're not top 10, top 25 teams, right? So there's a lot to be had and a lot to be said about what's going on with the Noles there, because the Noles were ranked number 10 when the season started, right? The Noles had a lot of potential. We had a lot going for us in the offseason. It looked good for the Noles. And coming off of a 13-0 season, now we did get our ass kicked by Georgia, but that was a fluke game in my opinion. We had most of our team who had played the whole year sit out because a lot of those guys now are in the NFL. They wanted to make sure they were going to get in the NFL safe. Jordan Travis with the leg injury. We had a lot happen at the end of the year, so it's some bad mojo, right? But now that we're looking forward, to this year, it's looking worse than we could have ever imagined. Florida State has essentially become the laughingstock of the college football world. We went from a front runner to be the ACC champion and possibly a lock in a bye week for the college football playoff to now at an 0-3 start looking like we might not even make a bowl game. Now, there's a lot to be said about that because Florida State has an absolutely legendary background as a football team. I'm 33 years old. As a kid, man, Florida State was just always one of the best teams. They had such a culture around them. It was prideful to be a Florida State fan. And it's just something that seems like in the last 10 years or so has just gone out the window for a lot of these teams. They have flashes of greatness. Again, last year, the playoff snub and all that was pretty much the big topic of the year, but now you're looking forward and you got to move forward from those things, right? You can't just live in the past. And so you get to this year, Georgia Tech, we lose on a field goal. So I was like, you know what? We shouldn't lose to Georgia Tech, but they're a sleeper team. Like some of these other teams, they just come out. Sometimes they just have a good game. It just wasn't your game. I was like, all right, maybe it just wasn't our, we're in Ireland for the game, whatever. So maybe there's just some outside factors at work here that maybe it was a fluke. But then when we played Boston College, man, we got our ass kicked. And to be honest, you're looking at it, the one common denominator for me is DJU. He looks like garbage. Like that kid, I've never really paid too much attention to him at Clemson. I never paid too much attention to him at Oregon State. It's just now that he's in Florida State, I'm like, oh my gosh, now that I watch this kid, he couldn't have been this bad the last 4 years. I don't know why we would have took him because he's like the definition of a bad quarterback. He's slow. He looks like he's got his feet in concrete. He doesn't make good decisions. He has a terrible passing motion, in my opinion. I mean, he throws the ball in a nice spiral, but he doesn't have this great mechanical quarterback look to him. He doesn't feel like a great quarterback. He looks uncomfortable. He looks unconfident. And that just kind of spreads throughout the team. That infects everyone else on the team. When they don't feel like the quarterback's going to lead them to greatness and the quarterback's going to take them to a victory when the time comes, everybody else starts to fold under the pressure too, because they start to feel like, who's going to be the one that's going to really lead us to victory here. Now, the units say the defense is playing okay. They're not playing amazing. They're playing all right. They're doing what they need to do. You got DJ Lundy and a couple of these other guys that are doing their jobs, but then every once in a while you get somebody like Patrick Payton yesterday who got absolutely turned around on a touchdown pass for Memphis. Like, he knows what he's doing. He knows his assignment. He shouldn't be going and doing these silly defensive mishaps, especially if they're going to lead to a score. I mean, these guys are conditioned. These guys have been around. It's not like their first year. They're not kids right out of high school that are doing this. These are guys that have been playing for a few years. So I can't blame the defense because it's a lot more on DJU in my opinion. Now, right now, it might not just be DJ, it might be the coaching, it might be a little bit of player inconfidence, but they need to make some changes because realistically, I don't want to go through too much of the recap because it doesn't really matter at this point, but you look at some of the stats, right? DJU 16-30 for 201, 0 touchdowns. Okay, that's not the worst stats when you look at it, but realistically a lot of that's garbage time. And then on the other side, he has negative 16 yards rushing. That means he's getting sacked, he's trying to run and getting pulled behind the line. That's just not great. Negative 16 means he is taking way too many hits behind the line. He is getting hit way too much and getting taken down behind the line of scrimmage way too often. You completed 16 passes but lost 16 yards with an average of negative 1.8 yards a loss when you're the quarterback. Like you can't take that, man. You got to do better than that, especially on 9 rushes, like 9 technical rushes. I don't know how many of those were sacks per se, but that means even when you got out, and he had positive runs. That's the bad part. He had positive runs. That means how bad was it at one point, you know? And when you look at, say, our receiving core, we had Malik Benson went off for 99 yards. Malik Benson's probably, and Ja'Kai Douglas are probably our 2 best receivers, but Ja'Kai had 1 target for 17 yards. They hit Morlock for a couple yards. He finally got going. And we have a good receiving core, especially you got Toafili. He's out there. He's a great gadget back, like things like that. You got players that can make plays, but you got to actually have a quarterback that can hit them and feel like he's got the energy and he's pushing the tempo of the offense and he's making the offense feel explosive, because it all starts with him, right? You look at somebody like a Tom Brady. He's not the most athletic guy on the field. He just makes great decisions, has great precision, and has his mind in the game. For me, it looks like DJ just doesn't want to be there, honestly. It looks like he is somebody who's just ready to be taken out of the game, and he looks like he's trying to, be a positive attitude, but it's just not enough. He looks half asleep. He doesn't look engaged. He doesn't look focused. Maybe he's just one of those quiet guys, but unfortunately, you need somebody that's a little animated to be a good quarterback. You need somebody who can take charge and make people really focus and feel alive when they're playing the game. So right now, that's my biggest common denominator, and that comes down to Norvell, though. That does come down to Norvell because he needs to see that as a coach. I get where he's coming from of like, look, we got to keep some of these guys playing because you don't want to lose the team. But I think there's something else going on here. I wonder if there's a situation going on with the boosters or somebody who's giving out these NIL deals because they don't want to sit the guy that they just paid for. But to be honest, you got to put somebody else in there because otherwise, and I heard somebody say it's a great point. How are you supposed to sell tickets for the next year? You have, out of the last 50 years, you've only had 3 0-3 starts in the history of the game in the last 50 years for the Florida State Seminoles. 2 of those have come under Mike Norvell. And, I give him a benefit of the doubt for his first, second year because he's a new coach coming in, trying to rebuild a program that already looked bad after Willie Taggart, Jimbo Fisher, stuff like that. You had COVID. There was a lot of factors in the last few years, but after you go 13-0, I get you got blown out by Georgia, but that was, again, a fluke game. You got to come back reestablished and make some dominant choices here. Like, you got to be the coach. You got to be the overseer. You got to be the guy who goes, look, we ain't handling losing. That's not our culture here. And you look at the greats of college football, I always think about Urban Meyer because, he coached Florida, and that was like some of the worst years as a college football fan for my life because I watch our rival go out and be one of the best teams of all time, and not because of the players. They had great players, but you look at Tebow, he wasn't the greatest quarterback. He's just somebody who believed in his team and his teammates and really was a leader. He truly was a leader when it came down to college football. That kid was great in college because he was a leader, even though he wasn't overall on paper the best quarterback. So same with Jordan Travis. You look at Jordan Travis, I spent a couple years really hyping him up. They went through the McKenzie Milton thing and like all these different situations at Florida State. And I used to tell people, I was like, dog, Jordan Travis is a football player. Like, that kid wants to play football. He might, on paper, he's not the biggest. He doesn't have the biggest arm. He's not the greatest quarterback of all time. But because he wants to play, he is focused and he's going to give more effort into the game than most people will just because they're 6'4" and they got a big arm. Like, just because you're good doesn't mean you are always going to be the right fit for the team. Sometimes a guy with heart plays a lot harder than the guy with skill and talent. Like, that's just what it is. So you got to make some decisions if you're Mike Norvell at this point, because realistically, going forward, our O-line looks terrible. Marvin Jones Jr. is a bust. Our defensive line's not getting any kind of push. Like, again, we've got backs like Patrick Payton isn't doing much. DJ Lundy's making some tackles, but it ain't like, these guys aren't making these impacts like they're supposed to, especially the big-name guys. And even, the power positions that were supposed to be making an impact, again, Toafili's been around for a while. And then him and Cam Davis, like, those guys just really don't seem to be, like, explosive like they should be. Our running backs are always explosive if you think about it. There's just such a history with Florida State that it's sad to see some of these talented players just not living up to, the standard of what Florida State football has been for the last, 30, 40, 50 years, honestly. Since Bobby Bowden started taking over, basically. I kind of go back to that. That was the start of the true Florida State football. And, even when Jimbo took over, they went to a national championship. Like, it wasn't like, again, Jameis Winston was out there killing it in college. Now, again, you look at him in the pros, he's gone off the rails a little bit. He's not quite what he used to be. But that happens with a lot of people. Same with Marcus Mariota. Same with, a lot of quarterbacks going to the pros, and it's a totally different game. But yeah, right now Florida State's got their backs against the wall, and I think Norvell personally is where it starts because he has to make some decisions before he gets ran out of town. Now, maybe he wants to get ran out of town. because his guarantees like 74 million or something stupid to get the buyout. It's dumb. I don't know why we keep doing that with these giant coaches. Like, I think that's also the biggest problem with the game right now is you go into the transfer portal and suddenly you're paying players to come play for you. And in college, that's stupid because college is more about pride. It's more about your school. It's more about playing for your brother on the field there because you're trying to earn your way into the NFL and maybe a positive future, playing athletics. But realistically, if you're going to get paid to play in college, like, what's the point, right? Like, you've already got a little bit of bag. You saw what happened to Johnny Manziel before the NIL even started. Same thing. He was just walking around getting money for signing autographs, doing some shady stuff, and that dude fell right off a cliff. So, I mean, what do you think's going to happen? It's always a bad motivation for people to only play for themselves when it's a team game. It's a team sport. You got to be able to build a little bit of camaraderie. Got to feel like everyone's playing there for you. And I know DJU, for example, like, he bought everybody Beats headphones with, like, Florida State spears on it. Like, I don't care. Like, you bought people stuff. You can't buy your way into camaraderie. Like, that's not how that works. Just because you buy something doesn't mean somebody now has a connection with you. We see that happen in real relationships all the time. You can't just be a material relationship. You got to have an emotional relationship. And with a team, you have to have that emotional side of it, because if you're not in each other's head, if you're not looking out for each other and truly feeling like you guys are brothers or a family together on that field, dying together, playing together, bleeding, sweating together, like, you aren't going to succeed. And there are other teams out there, especially when they're underdogs, and they say, hey, we got Florida State on the schedule. They used to be good. I think now we got a chance. You can see where that happens. It just happened with Notre Dame last week, too, when they lost to NIU. Biggest win in NIU history. But that's because that team was playing together. Those were a band of brothers. That wasn't just a bunch of transfer portal players that are coming in just to get to a bigger school, have a bigger name attached to them for the NFL draft stock. And they didn't think this was going to happen. Like Riley Leonard and DJU, they didn't think they were going to suddenly start losing to bad teams. These are much lesser college recruits, if you think about it. These schools aren't football schools, half these schools that are actually winning these games. They're not legendary football programs like Notre Dame and Florida State. Like, they have legendary status. And so when you get these teams coming out like NIU and Memphis beating up on these teams, something's disconnected there. It's more of a emotional disconnect. So for me, that's what I would like to see, is Norvell make a change, throw in Brock Glenn. At least Brock played a few times last year, and again, he was a game manager. He actually won some games. Right now, DJU is 0-3. Like, you got to cut the bleeding. You got to get rid of the infection while it's still there. You can't die first. I mean, you don't want to wait until the person's on the deathbed, point of no return, before you go, okay, maybe we'll make a change. Now it's too late. You got to do it now while there's still some hope, and you still have a fan base that wants to see you succeed. We're just begging you to make a change. But when you just sit there, especially at a press conference, and he's got the Jimbo effect where he seems a little bit more hick and country every time I hear him talk at a post game, and he's just beating around the bush with these questions. He seems a little fed up, but that's the point, is I can't tell if he's fed up because he knows his job's on the line or if he's actually trying to win some games here. Because I think that's a difference. It's one thing to know that you got a good team, and another thing to want to back up your players, but you got to hold your players accountable. And just like anybody else, man, I tell you what, there's no Bill Belichick's or Nick Saban's that are coming out there and letting their starting quarterback lose 3 games in a row without trying something. They're just not going to do it. And I know I've heard people have the opinion, hey man, the second you start benching seniors like that, they feel like you're throwing away the year. They're not going to buy in. Nah, man, they a lot of people are looking for a spark. They want a leader. They want to believe in somebody. And sometimes just a kid coming in that's positive and can make some plays and puts himself on the line, that's all they're looking for. And for me, I don't see that from DJ. DJ runs, he will slide down or he looks like he's in concrete half the time. Like, he's running in quicksand. It's just bad. So I don't think that's really inspiring anybody on our team right now. So you might as well try something. I mean, what's the point? You got to get the youth some practice. Those guys are going to be playing next year. If a senior doesn't want to play this year because he's like, well, what's the point? Then that's his problem. You got to be looking towards the future at this point, because if this season's not salvageable, or you're not going to try some things to see if you can create a spark, then you've already lost. I mean, you might as well just throw in the towel for half these games, because I mean, we're not going to beat a lot of, we might not beat Florida. We might not beat, we're definitely not beating Miami. We're not beating anybody, to be honest. Like, there's a good chance we aren't beating hardly anybody going forward on this, because like, if we can't beat Memphis, which is one of the easier teams on the schedule, it doesn't look good. And we didn't want to be this unrated Florida State team again. Like, that wasn't something we were looking forward to as fans. Like, we just weren't looking for it. I'm not exactly sure what our schedule looks like right now. I'm about to look it up because, again, Memphis, in my opinion, they outplayed us pretty well. Like, they did not look like a bad team. They just looked like that team that was, bringing their A game a little bit better than ours. You know, you got Hennigan, 25 for 38, 272, 2 touchdowns. Man, that kid was balling out. When you got a kid like that goes to Memphis just balling out 10 times harder than DJU, bro, that's sad. That's really sad. And you know, a better rushing game than we had, really. I mean, not by much, but you know, they had quite a few players, 50, 60 yards, 40 yards passing. You know, almost what, 6 different receivers with 20 or more yards receiving, all of them with 3 or more catches. Like, dude, you guys are spreading the ball around. You guys are making plays. I mean, more props to them. Like, Memphis looked good. Memphis didn't look, you know, like Florida State. So at this point, you gotta have a spark, man. You gotta have some people get out there and believe that they want to win. And sometimes you got to give that person a chance who doesn't have that right now. They get an opportunity, they run with it. You look at Tom Brady; he will say that all day. Hey, man, when I got in there, when Bledsoe went down, I looked at Robert Kraft and said, "Hey, thank you for the opportunity. I will never let you down." And he said, "Man, when I get that opportunity, I'm not giving it back. That's my opportunity. I'm running with it." So you might as well give something, you know, give Brock Glenn a chance and just see if something happens. Because right now, and start doing some gadget plays, man. Like, we ain't doing too much. We started the first Georgia Tech game great, and then literally since the first drive of the season, we have looked like dog water. So, you know, might as well try something at this point. That's my take on it. I think if not, you might need to do some coaching, because I mean, Adam Fuller's doing what he can with what he's got, but there's not much for the offensive coordination. There's not much for the head coaching. There's, you know, I just don't see the passion and the discipline right now with this team. There's not a winning culture, so it's got to be driven into the right guys. You got to get some guys out there that want to play the game, some guys that are going to be, you know, more heart than talent at this point. That's all you can try. So, you know, that's my take on it. You know, I'm not exactly sure if we have I want to say it's probably a noon kickoff this week. I don't know why it wouldn't be a noon kickoff. I'm trying to look right now. But yeah, if Florida State, oh yeah, we play Cal. That's right, and it's not noon. It's a 7 p.m. kickoff. That's embarrassing, bro. We're gonna be playing a 7 p.m. kickoff against Cal. Yeah, it's rough. I'm not sure we're beating Cal. I'm not sure we're beating SMU. Clemson, we're definitely not beating Clemson. Hell no. And that's bad if we got DJU starting at that point. We'll probably lose to Duke, Miami, UNC. Like, it's not looking good, man. Notre Dame later. I mean, Charleston Southern, maybe that's the win of the schedule left. I mean, we might literally go 1-12 here. I don't know. It's honestly tough to even like wrap your head around how bad Florida State is this year, because, you know, I don't remember how the last time we were this bad. That was like, you know, with the hype that we have. It's, again, new coach, new seasons, things like that, players, you know. But I'm like, man, I didn't feel this bad when we had DeAndre Francois and James Blackman starting. So yeah, for now, that's it. You know, let me know what you think down in the comments. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Yeah, we're hoping that Florida State can start getting on the right track this week, but we'll see. You know, again, Cal, Memphis, you know, Georgia Tech, Boston College, a lot of those teams kind of in the same ether, in my opinion. They're mid-tier teams. They're not amazing. They're not bad, but maybe we'll just have a good day. I'll take it at this point. I don't care. We just need to get some things clicking. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think about it down in the comments. Tell me what you think we need to do to make some changes. And, yeah, have a good one. I'll see you on the next video.